Welcome. Well, you've already been here and you've seen us talk, so we'll just get going into our talk.
So here we are. That's Rob. If you didn't know.
Oh yeah,
we should do.
We gotta do an introduction. Sorry. All right. Hey everybody. My name is Robert Perry Cruz, and like he has said, we are ABA Inside Track. I'm joined with my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey Rob, it's me Diana.
And it's me Jackie. It's 2023, so I get to go last.
This is like their favorite bit, is that they change who goes in what order.
Because for 5 years, I got last, always.
Well, you can have the next 5, I told you.
And I was feeling sad.
But you already switched us back, so.
So I brought it up.
Oh, well.
We had a meeting. I said, can we meet? Talk about order?
Yeah, that's what our production meetings usually look like. We talk about who's going to go first. So we're very glad to have you all join us today. We're very thankful for BABAT to invite us to do this talk on going from student to professional. It's a topic that even though we're all very old and we've done this for a very long time, we still remember what it was like to be a student and how challenging that can be depending on where you are working after school, where you are working during school. And so when we were asked to sort of talk on this subject, we kind of tried to think about what would be some key pieces of information that would be relevant for today's student, hoping relevant to today's students. And today's students, you will please let us know how relevant these facts are. We hope very is the answer.
We also, some of us, supervise students moving into the professional role, right? So we serve as mentors for graduate students that have just graduated, and so we have that perspective as well. Mm-hmm. And so our learning objectives are above us, in the air.
There they are.
We're going to be talking about some challenges that happen when you move from being a student to being a professional or being a supervisor. We're going to talk about how we can identify strategies to make that transition a little bit easier, including mentorship, developing communities of practice, and also supervision. Mm-hmm. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Sure is.
Because there's 3 things you need to do. You need to have someone to count on to help you. You need to find people that you can work with as an equal. And then you need to be prepared, because you never know when all of a sudden your year out of graduate school, you're in charge of a bunch of other people, which is probably, fun at first and then quickly becomes less fun when you realize, I don't quite know how to do this yet, because, hey, it's your first job or second job, right? So why don't we start with the part you're probably most familiar with, which is who can you look up to? Because, as folks who are finishing up school or finished school or just out of school, you probably have a huge group of individuals that would kind of fall into that category for you. So Diana, why don't you start us off with that discussion of point 1, mentorship.
I will do that, but first I'm going to tell people what articles we
that's
were
right.
referencing in this talk, if that's okay.
Yes, totally.
Okay. Great. So we each took a section of this upcoming talk, and we each basically reference, we reference like a lot of different stuff, but we each have like 2 main articles that we are reviewing. So we pulled those to be the articles that we discuss in this intro part. And so they are as follows. Supervision for Early Career BCBAs. That's by Brown, Randall, Smith, and Rios. That was just published 2023 in Behavior Analysis and Practice. It is brand new, it doesn't even have page numbers yet. Next up, Future Directions of Training and Fieldwork in Diversity Issues in Applied Behavior Analysis by Connors, Johnson, Duarte, Murky, and Marks. That was also published in Behavior Analysis and Practice, as is every single article we will reference.
They love supervision.
Yeah, right.
Shout out to BAP.
But that was in 2019. Then, Designing a Successful Supervision Journey, Recommendations and Resources for New BCBA Supervisors. That was written by Friedland, McElroy, Moses, Jensen, and Van Straten, BAP 2022. The Apprentice, an innovative approach to meet the Behavior Analysis Certification Board's supervision standards by Hartley, Courtney, Rossworm, and Lamarca. That was published in BAP in 2016 in that hefty supervision volume. Next up, The Training Experiences of Behavior Analysts, Compassionate Care and Therapeutic Relationships with Caregivers by LeBlanc Taylor, and I actually don't know how you say her name.
Marchese.
Marchese? Sorry about that. And that was in BAP in 2019. What were we going to say?
I said N.
N, yes. N Marchese. And finally, to round it out, recommendations for detecting and addressing barriers to successful supervision by Sellers, LeBlanc, and Valentino. It's really the trifecta there. And that was published in BAP in 2016.
You're missing some articles though, Diana.
Oh yeah, Rob didn't put his
You didn't put them in the top.
I did not know I was supposed to put them.
You
in the
did
top.
because Jackie texted you that.
Oh, I put them somewhere else. All right. Do you want to do them real quick? Or do you want me to do
Yeah,
them?
sure.
I didn't put them in the top.
Yeah.
I put together a whole game. You missed it if you're just hearing the recording of this.
Okay, also, updated strategies for making regular contact with the scholarly literature by Briggs and Mateer, and that was published in, guess where? You're right, it was BAP, and that was in 2022. And then
The bush.
this one's not BAP. I don't know if we can talk about it.
Oh, what? Come on.
All right, The More We Get Together, Communities of Practice for Behavior Analysts by Bush, Chartier, Zonneveld, Saini, Lethan, and Asaro. And that was published in the Canadian Journal of Behavioral with a U, Science.
It's a little bit different
2020.
than American
I hope that when they
science.
thought about it, they were like, the sign
The
language
more we get together, together.
They had to.
Together.
There's no way they
Yeah.
just came up with that title on accident.
Clever.
Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, Rob is right. So
Thank you. Wow. Heard it here, folks.
That's a complete non sequitur. Just Rob is right. No, when we were trying to figure out how can we really capture what we wanted to talk about with this group today, we first of all started thinking about what are the challenges, right, of moving from being an ABA student to an ABA, do we call it practitioner, professional, or clinician? And I think everyone can acknowledge that it's a big jump, right? So as a student, you're really in learning mode. You're someone's going to tell me what to do, and then I'm going to do it, and then it will be done, right? And that's your focus is I'm going to get to here, to here, to here. And then all of a sudden, you all of those laid out goalposts, you've accomplished them. I'm mixing my metaphors, but you've jumped over all those hurdles, right?
Hopefully.
Well, yeah, you're gonna do it, yeah. And then you get to that point in time and you're those goalposts aren't being laid out for me anymore by someone else. Now all of a sudden, I kind of have to figure out my own path and forge my path here. So, you're focused on I got to pass that test. And then all of a sudden you're oh, now I just have to be an amazing behavior analyst, no big. But that is pretty big. There's a lot to it, and you can sort of interpret it differently, what that might look like for different people. So we wanted to take maybe a big picture approach on what we saw as the different areas that as a new professional, you might be looking for guidance and where you might find it. So we said, I think an important piece here is that your interactions with people change, right? So you might still be operating within a community that you already know, but your role within that community might move around a little bit. So there's that interesting piece where you have to kind of have to reposition and rethink about some of those relationships, and the relationships that you had established might need to be restructured to some degree. So we said, okay, so let's imagine you're a new behavior analyst.
Because you are.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah. For me, I'm imagining it because it was kind of a long time ago. But let's imagine. So you have folks who you look up to, right? So you have people who you're looking to for guidance. So we feel like that's a big piece. You still need guidance as a new BCBA, absolutely. And no one's denying that. So I'm going to talk about mentorship. But then there's another piece, which is your peers. So you have a new group of peers, and maybe they're folks you knew in grad school, right? Or maybe you changed companies and you have a whole new group of clinicians who are now your peers. Those are great opportunities for you as a new BCBA to continue to learn and grow. Rob is going to talk about establishing those types of communities of practice. And then, like we also said, there's a good chance that you are now all of a sudden, not only in charge of a bunch of clinical cases, but you're also suddenly supervising people. And that's a big job. We've made updates, I think, to do a better job of teaching people how to do that, right? But it's still very overwhelming. Not to mention, sometimes they're the people who used to be your peers, and now you're supposed to be supervising them.
Like your besties, now your bossies. right?
Yeah, and that is awkward and difficult to navigate.
What?
Is that a phrase? Bossies?
I made it up.
It was good.
Yeah, it was good.
That's what I use
On the spot.
with the people I supervise. No, I
Oh,
use
you've
that.
been using that phrase. Okay.
Roll with
They
it.
used to be besties, now they're bossies.
Yeah. So we thought about that too, right? So that's another change that you have to then navigate and what those relationships might look like. And that is an entire skill set to build of supervisory skills. So that's what Jackie's going to talk about. So it's like people you look up to, people that you work with, and then people who you're now supposed to supervise. So that was the structure.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. And now I'll actually start
Now you
talking.
should- yeah.
So, in case anyone's unfamiliar, this is the current data from the BACB website. You can see it up there. And the reason I put it up here is because, wow, there are a lot of new BCBAs. So this is like not quite an exponential graph, I know, but it's like seriously growing. And when I went in and did like a little bit of math on it there, roughly the number of BCBAs has doubled since 2018. So in the last 5 years, in 2018, there were 30,000 BCBAs. In whatever year it is right now, there are 60,000 BCBAs, which is twice as many. And that is a lot of people who are new to the role themselves, right? And who are now also being asked to supervise people too. So it's a big growth for our field, which is good, but it's also something that we want to approach with caution, because even if you've been in your job for a couple years, you still need guidance, right? There's just so much to learn. And you can learn a lot in school, but the on-the-job training that you get being a clinician is just truly invaluable. So I know like no one's arguing. You're not like, yeah, I know it all, right? I know that no one's thinking that. But there are several ways in which, as a new clinician, you might need guidance. So you might need clinical guidance from someone. You might need ethical guidance from someone. And again, no shame in that. We all need it, right? Or you might need guidance in how to supervise too. So those are, I think, three big areas in which people can continue to need guidance. And so that brings us to this idea. You're not necessarily in a position of getting supervision anymore in the capital S way from the BACB side of things, right? Hopefully you still have a supervisor. Mm-hmm. But that supervisor may function in a different capacity than your BACB supervisor did before. So that brings us into this idea of mentors and mentorship. And the literature doesn't always separate out those terms that particularly clearly or distinctly. So you might see those used interchangeably in some ways. But to me, a mentor isn't just the person that you report to at work, right? A mentor is someone that you really genuinely look up to and that you can ask for guidance as needed. And it doesn't have to just be one person. So it could be that you have a clinical mentor, and it could be that you have an ethical mentor, or you have a supervision mentor. And it may be someone that you knew for a long time. It might be someone that you knew in grad school or who's been your work supervisor, but it also might not, and that's okay too. So if you're sitting here thinking I don't have anyone like that in my life, it's not too late. You can take on new mentors at any point in time as long as you identify who those people might be and ask them. So there's not a ton out there on finding a mentor, but there is stuff out there about being a good supervisor. And again, like I said, when we think about what it entails, being a good supervisor, also a lot of it is entailed in being a good mentor as well. So we can kind of look at that and start to think about what would be the qualities that you'd want to have in a mentor based on what we know. And all right, so maybe you guys can tell me, because I made a Cementimeter cloud, but I don't want to take up all of our time. So can you share, what do you think is an important quality of a good mentor? It could be a real one or a hypothetical one, depending on your own experiences. Or you guys can tell me too.
I'll tell you one.
Okay, great.
That they have to be excited to see you.
Oh.
Right? Because the worst thing is when you have a mentor, which happened to me at one point, and I was like, hey, and they're like,
oh no.
Right? That's not great. When you think you have a mentor and you go to them and they're not happy to see you, then that's not going to be a good way to start the relationship, right? Then you're going to be less likely to want to go see them because they're not happy to see you. So that's my first one, is
okay.
that when you show up, they're like, hey, and not like, oh, it's you.
Okay, good. Great. Do you have anyone to comment or anyone? Yes, please.
They give you good feedback and help you reach your goals.
Awesome. Good feedback, help you reach your goals. Yes?
I like someone who is a good listener,
A good listener.
a safe listener.
Ooh, I like that you added that. A safe listener. Yeah, good.
I feel like they should probably qualify to mentor you in that specific area. So
Right. So
they have something they're trying to get to.
so they should be qualified to mentor you. And I know like we're like laughing because it sounds funny, but I actually have a slide to talk about that specific thing. So I'm glad you brought it up because I don't know that it is as much of a default as we're like imagining it to be. Good. For me, I want a mentor who's authentic. Yeah.
How do you define authentic when you're looking for a mentor, Dan?
That if something is stupid, that they are going to tell you that it's stupid.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, everything's going to be fine. Like sometimes things are stupid and bad, right?
True.
And then they are going to acknowledge that with you, sit in it with you for a little while, and then help you find a solution.
Yeah. Fraudland, the article Fraudland on All 2022 actually has a really good whole paragraph about like if you don't currently have a mentor in your workplace or in your organization, how to find one. They said, look at the BACB registry, look at the people that are writing the books on supervision and supervision mentorship. Don't be scared to write them and say, hey, I need a mentor, and can we set something up? Most of the time, people will not say no, right? And if they do say no, then they'll usually give you resources to go to so that they're not just like, sorry, bye,
It
right?
wasn't meant to be,
Yeah. So
right?
like,
They wouldn't have had time for you if
Right,
they
they're
can't.
like, I'm
Yeah.
very too busy, because they
Very
can't
too
even
busy.
speak.
Yeah.
Then they'd say, okay, here's some other people that you could reach out to. So I think if you don't currently have a mentor and you don't feel comfortable reaching out to any of your professors in graduate school or at your organization for whatever reason, I would encourage you to read that little section in Fraudland in 2022 because they give excellent examples of how to find a mentor.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so those are all. Did you say one?
Would you like me to?
Yeah.
Oh, that I like in a mentor? I think it goes with authentic a little bit, but that's why I asked. Enthusiastic would definitely be one that I don't know if that's something that I just like to bring to my own like supervision and potential mentorship, but somebody who really cares about the field because it is not easy to do this job day in and day out. And if you're not excited when you learn something new and you're not having someone in your life who's excited to share new information with you, it can become a drag and it can turn from caring less and less about sort of the conceptually systematic pieces of it and more to the, I have so many tricks and I'll just go through them until I get tired and go home. And so you really want someone who can help you in those times when you're just not feeling it, that whatever brought you to the field originally.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
So enthusiastic, authentic, safe listener, qualified, and oh no, I forgot exactly what you said.
Someone that gives good feedback.
Oh yeah,
And helps you reach your goals.
perfect. Yeah, sorry, it was the first one. So good feedback helps you reach your goals. Those are all important pieces of being a good supervisor or a good mentor. So this exercise will help us when Jackie takes a turn to talk to, because all of those things will come up again. I read a bunch of different articles in preparation for this, and one of them was an interview with Beth Sulzer-Azeroff from 2015. And I didn't reference it because I just wanted to pull this one little piece from it. But she talked about the mentors and supervisors, or really the mentors that she had. And I just pulled some of the points that she made as far as who was a good mentor for her. So she said she wanted to find someone who had success in areas of motivating and managing behavior, understanding what results they were seeking, and being specific on how they were going to assess her performance and provide specific constructive feedback, as well as pairing that feedback with reinforcing statements and other reinforcers. So I think that is also kind of a nice bridge for us to think about some of these. Yes?
I just want to add in that Beth Sulzer-Azeroff, for anyone that doesn't know, is also the founder of
Nailed it.
I knew.
In case I didn't come through, Beth Sulzer-Azarov was the founder of BABAT. Wow, we really just brought that full circle. We should probably just stop broadcasting.
I knew that.
Like 1 point. We didn't finish the first point. We gotta keep going.
Oh, okay, fine. Thank you, Stacy.
I knew.
I should have known. Okay. All right, so that gives us some more context, right, for potential characteristics in finding a good mentor and the types of things that we might be looking for. At the end of one of the sellers' articles, they also give us some good tips, right, on how to, they're really talking about how to be a good supervisor, right? But part of the end of it, they said, how should we, as a supervisor, continue that relationship with our former trainees? And so that brings us right over into this area of mentorship. And so I put them up here. I know they're probably super small to read, but their recommendations were, make sure that there's established parameters of ongoing support. So you know how much you can expect from this person who's going to become your mentor. Is that person going to be actively communicating with you on how you two can be in touch in the future, how they can contact you? Is the plan that there's going to be some ongoing check-ins? I think that that's nice because you might not know when you need to reach out necessarily. If you're in contact with that person, then you don't have to do the awkward thing where you're like, I really need to talk to you, right? You'll already know that meeting's happening. A good mentor can also set up for you a network of individuals who can serve as professional contacts in the future. They will hopefully invite you to engage and support with others who are also in the same position, right? Which is what Rob's going to talk about with peers. And then ideally help you continue to access resources as well. All right, so if you are a brand new BCBA, we do have some guidelines from the BACB that you need to be supervised yourself in order particularly to be providing supervision. So Brown and colleagues very recently did a survey to try to sort of analyze how well that's happening. They sent a survey to about 350 early career BCBAs and asked them a lot of different questions on what their current experiences are like. So they asked them, how much supervision are you getting? About 50% of them were getting less than 1 hour a week of supervision. And 33% of them were getting more. Where the remaining 17% is, I don't know. I don't know what happened there. But that means that half people, they're meeting with their supervisor, but not for a super long period of time, right? So we have, I don't know that statistic gives us all the information we need, but it tells us a little bit. And the piece that I also found noteworthy here was that our brand new BCBAs, only at 13%, so I guess only 13%, but it's still 13%, were themselves being supervised by someone who had less than 5 years of experience, right? So it's I still think of that as kind of a new person, and they're now supervising someone else. So it's just a reflection of how much our field has grown, that if you're gonna have somebody supervise someone, and half of those people only got their supervision in the last year, well, some of those people are by necessity gonna now become supervisors of new BCBAs. They also talked about barriers that were being experienced to, I'm saying supervision, but I mean post-trainee supervision. And these early career BCBAs said lack of infrastructure was 80% of them noted that as a barrier. So just not having those opportunities built in. Lack of available and qualified supervisors, 72% of them said that was a barrier to them really receiving the level of mentorship that they wanted to get. And they also noted that a large case size was negatively correlated with the amount of supervision that was received. And I think they didn't really expand upon that, but I think that makes sense. If our new BCBA has a large case size, then chances are their supervisor also has a large case size, right? And so that is why we're seeing that trickle down of maybe lack of supervision there. They also asked this group, would they like to have a more postgraduate training period before they were sort of introduced into their roles? And 76% of them said, yes, please, we want that. So I think that reflects on how much people would like to continue to be supervised and receive guidance in their early careers. 98% of them wanted more support and training, and 62% reported that they thought more supervision would lead to less burnout, which is also something Jackie's going to touch on. And the areas that they wanted more support and training, so this would ideally be coming from a supervisor or mentor, were professional development, such as self-management skills, collaborating with others, insurance and business essentials, which you don't learn in school, but many people find that they would really like to know that.
You think it's so easy. You're like, I can do that. No big deal.
Yep, right?
You do it and you're like, swear word, swear word, swear word. What is happening?
Providing supervision, technical skill development, like graphing, parent training, and then only 43% said diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So the authors were kind of worried a little bit about that. But this tells us that people want to be mentored and supervised, but there are some barriers to sort of having this happen. And then the last slide I have there is from this Hartley article. And again, they're talking about folks who are completing their hours, but their suggestions are, how can we like make a structure within our organization so that people can get the training and supervision, and let's add mentorship onto there that they need. And so they have a really lovely like outline in this article about how they could kind of make that happen. And kind of like on about the third or fourth row there, they start breaking it down. So they say we have a behavior analyst, and then we have what's called an assistant behavior analyst. And they describe it as people who are like finishing up their hours, but it definitely could also be people who have their BCBA but can't yet bill for services, right? And so this model is a level where people are still being very closely mentored by the person who's directly over them, but they also have a lot of opportunity. So they call this an apprenticeship model, and it's kind of a nice model where it might be available. So let's say you are finding yourself in need of a mentor, and you're not sure where to get one, or maybe more than one, right? Jackie's suggestions were excellent, so check out that article. In addition to that, I would say if you are like on the job search, look for a place that supports their early career BCBAs. That to me is the number one here. So an organization that has a structure like this or has thought about this and can answer those questions when you ask them, right? What are you going to do for me as a brand new BCBA is a question you absolutely can ask to someone. Because remember, you got the goods, right? Like you are wanted, they need you, and you are going to be there ready to do good work for them. So you can absolutely ask, how are you going to support me so that I can be the best I can be? And if they don't have a model that supports that, then that isn't going to be the place where you can really learn and grow, right? So that's my number one piece of advice. If you do have someone that you'd like to have as a mentor, maybe they've supervised you in the past, maybe they're your professor, or maybe it's someone that you don't actually know that well, ask them formally, will you function in this role for me? And then the two of you can figure out what that's going to look like. Is it a situation where, yes, we have a regular meeting and we do check-ins, right? Or are they, what I wrote, or is it an on-retainer relationship where you just like, I need your help, right? Like you just call when it is actually a question that you have. And either one may work for the two of you, but setting it up ahead of time is good. And my other recommendation is seeking out advice from later career BCBAs. It may be that you want to have a mentor and a touch point if you have particular questions, but you may also find yourself just searching for like general advice. And there are so many folks in our field that have amazing stories to tell. So finding where they have those written down or where you can listen to them can also help you sort of build up your own problem-solving history, right, with respect to how you might think about and solve some of those hard problems. And then don't forget about John Bailey's ethics hotline as well. If you're in a pinch and you need some ethical guidance, you can definitely check that out too. Okay, I'm done.
So one of the great things about mentorship is that is going to be a huge part of your first job. But as you continue on in this field, it is going to be less and less of the important part of your job. You're going to be more needing to supervise greater numbers of people as long as you continue to be successful in the field. But you're also going to find yourself coming into contact with more and more peers. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that might look like in terms of developing your own community of practice. Part of that is going to be because, especially as you start a new job, as you're getting out of graduate school, we talked about how so many of those priorities that you've had are going to change. Whereas before you used to have people telling you exactly what you needed to do, and once that was done, you've done it. You've done the behavior analysis for the day. No one will be telling you that beyond what your job responsibilities are. And for those of you who are currently, working a certain job or maybe working as a behavior technician or working, sort of a lab assistant, you know that there's a lot more to a job than just practicing and getting better at behavior analysis. A lot of things in jobs are kind of boring. It's not related to our field necessarily directly. It just kind of has to be done. You're also going to realize that the places you work may not have the same priorities in terms of your professional development, though hopefully you're taking the advice Diana has and finding a place that shares those values with you. You're also going to find, actually you can go to the next slide if you want, Jackie, we've got some reasons, some barriers to improving your practice. You're also going to find that some of what you're interested in learning more about may not be what your job is interested in your learning about. A lot of folks are always wondering, when do you read all these journals, Rob? When do you read all your journals? And I do a lot of it at home, but there are times when I do it at work because it is specifically related to a problem that I need to solve. And while I think at this point in my career, no one's going to walk in and see me reading something and ask me about it, how dare you be reading on the job? I wouldn't be surprised if, especially in a new role, that might not be so well received as, hey, what are you reading on the job? That's not what I'm paying you for. You're supposed to be filling out bills or working with students, working with clients, working with supervisees, right? Also, some of the things that were easy, that response effort in terms of how do I get access to journals? Well, people hand them to me. They've Xeroxed the articles. Or hell, they don't even Xerox them anymore, right? They're online. I don't have to go anywhere. I can look at them on my phone.
They're mimeographed.
They're mimeographing your articles for you. Just for fun. They're mostly on your phone. Suddenly, you need to pay for some of this content. It's not free anymore, nor is it in front of you. You must go find it out. But again, if your values continue to be, I want to get better at this job, I want to get better faster, and I want to add what I think is important to the field of behavior analysis to my place of employment, it's hard to just do that by yourself. It's also hard to know, especially depending on where you work, depending on what your mentorship and supervisory roles are, am I getting better at my job or am I just doing my job longer and longer and maybe coming up with some cheats here or there to make it more efficient? But that's not necessarily the same thing as becoming a better behavior analyst. So you also now have that added challenge of even if you do want to seek out journals, even if you are contacting literature, how do you know that what you're reading is actually going into meaningful practice versus I can talk a lot about journals and things I've read and I always have facts to bring up, but I don't know how to do any of it. And sometimes that's just because it's hard to know how to turn some research directly into practice. And sometimes it's just that fear of this is a little beyond what I think I can do. So will I be acting unethically if I just take something I read and say, I'm going to do it tomorrow, right? I read about the VB map. I know all about it. I never run it, but it sounds easy enough. I'll just do it tomorrow. You probably won't harm anyone with that. It probably just won't be that good a VB map if no one is watching you. You may muddle through it. The child may have a fun time with you if they have a good report, but probably not going to be the best report you ever wrote. And again, it might just waste everybody's time. But again, good job for trying. So you've got a lot of challenges. And the other challenge is going to be your life has been, I am in graduate school. It's a part of your identity. I'm in school, I'm learning, this is what I do. I go home and I read these things and I have homework to do. And your friends say, of course, because you're in graduate school and it's important that you keep doing your homework. No one's going to thank you for doing more work when you're done. You have the rest of your life to live, and it doesn't always have to do with reading articles or working with peers or going to your job. There are other things you want to do with your time.
You should
What could
be.
they be?
You should.
You have to be.
But
You
I will
can't-
say, the part where you like free food, that never goes away.
Well, that's
That's
why you
true.
continue going to professional events. That's
That's
why
right.
that's why they have free food at many of these events. Because again, anything organizations can do to make your life a little easier, right? So you're dealing with a lot of barriers that did not exist potentially a week or two ago before you graduated. And there are a couple things that you can do to make your life a little bit easier while still living up to the values of continuing to improve as a professional and increase your scope of competence. One of the easiest ones I've always thought, and we always thought, and that's why we have this podcast, is keeping up with the literature. I still remember it was at a BABAT talk where the discussion of how do you keep up with the literature, the original Carr and Briggs 2010 article was brought up. And I said to myself, that is an easy way to keep up with the literature, even though I've mostly worked in public schools throughout my career, or these at least the past decade or so, which means that when you ask someone, oh, can you tell me about behavior analysis? You kind of get a blank stare a lot of the time. You write the behavior plans, right? I think that's your job. You tell me about behavior analysis. So it was one of the ways that I found just very easy to contact at least some of the literature. But I also then made a podcast about reading literature and behavior analysis, so maybe we are outliers in terms of how much fun this is to do in our free time. So again, it's all going to be about how do I make this easier on myself? Not because everything in life should be easy, but because realistically, if you don't think of ways to decrease the response effort in keeping up with the literature and increasing your practice, it just becomes one more thing you have to do.
And you will die.
Yeah, you will. I mean, eventually you will die regardless of how good you are at any of these things. But it is definitely a challenge that then becomes harder and harder to keep up, especially as you are getting, older, you're getting more senior in your career, you have more responsibilities, you're probably doing more with your life than you were in graduate school. No offense, grad students, but you expand what you have time to do, and you're not always going to want to focus on your job as number one goal. So a lot of barriers will come up. So few recommendations from the updated version of the Carr and Briggs, the Briggs-Mateer 2022 article that they have, certainly have to do with the idea of how do we get access to articles easily. So the problem, number one, is what should you even be looking at? Like, what are the things that matter to you? So some of that is going to be, since no one's telling you what matters, you need to figure it out a little bit yourself. Sometimes that just means doing, we have so many good search engines these days. Sometimes just what is the problem you are facing? Throw in a tag, throw in a word, throw in a phrase, plus Java, plus BABAT, plus behavior analysis. You might not find what you're looking for, but you might find some articles that are close enough that you can sort of then look at the references, see if there's an author, maybe somebody that you could then reach out to and say, I have a problem, I don't see it in our articles, but do you know of anything? Because if someone's published an article close to what you're interested in, they've probably done exactly what you just did. They typed it into Google and they typed problem I'm having plus behavior analysis, right? It works very well. You certainly can use Google Scholar, PubMed Central, there's a lot of open access journals, but that's kind of step one. Find something that seems close to what you're looking for, and then see if there are other references that kind of nail it in the title. That's the problem I have, and I'll read that article. Or email some of the authors in the closest behavior analytic journal that you can find. Just say, do you have any other resources, any place else I should be looking? So that can help a little bit. Certainly if you have a mentor, they may be able to do some of this for you, though eventually you want to be able to do this yourself. Again, this does raise a problem. I don't know where you're all going to work. You may not know where you'll all be working in 5 years. So you may come up with a problem that hasn't been as well addressed in behavior analytic literature as you would like to say, okay, I know this is in my lane, I know this is in my level of competence, I can just read this and maybe put it into practice. So sometimes you may need to look in other journals. That's okay. Nothing wrong with starting and doing some searches in other journals just to get some information so you can use it to help your search for what we have in our field. Again, sometimes we don't. But the problem is going to be that unlike some journals, not a lot is free anymore. You certainly don't have access to your institutional library anymore. I have 2 people who sometimes will help me get access to things through their institutional library loan, because otherwise you try to get anything from the field of psychology or education, unless it's a blog, it's going to be like $50 for like that 4-page article. You don't even know.
$49.95.
You don't even know if it's going to be a good article and they're expecting
One
you to pay.
time.
Does that abstract tell you enough? I don't know. So not everything is free anymore. Fortunately, there are a couple ways you can get free access, and so that's kind of our next slide. When you become a BCBA, you can go to the BACB website, and there's a resources tab, which at one point I don't know what it had on there. I think it was empty. But now look at this long list of all these articles you can access for free. Some of them you can get fresh, new articles published. Some of them you're only going to be able to get the last year. So like BAP and Journal of Analysis of Verbal Behavior, I believe, and Perspectives on Behavior Science. Those are the ones you can't get the most recent. But again, they'll have a lot of first online or first publications that you can get. Journal of OBM, Positive Behavior Interventions. Also, ResearchGate is another place that you can search. You can find so many articles that are free. And if they're not on there, again, email the author. There's nothing more fun than emailing an author and saying, I really love a copy of your work. I think it's going to be great. And a lot of times they'll email you back. Sometimes they'll even say, wow, thank you. No one's asked me for this article yet. And they seem very excited.
One time I emailed an author that wrote a paper in 1978, and he's like, hold on, let me go in my garage and look for the original data. And then he sent me copies of his original data from 1978. And he's like, thank you so much. I've been meaning to get this out again. It's like, wow, go you.
It is fun. It's a great way. And maybe you find a mentor actually, I'm also looking for a mentor while you're looking for that journal in your garage.
We'll hang out in
you
your
know?
garage. One thing I do want to note, though, is if you aren't currently a BCBA, your resources tab won't look this nice. So you do have to be a BCBA to have this resource tab. When my students graduate, I'm like, now you have all the resources. And they would go and they're like, no, not yet. So access your institution for like the summertime before it expires, right? But then hurry up and take your exam so then you can have all the access to this.
It is very nice to have all of this access.
I don't have that access because I work at an institution. They make you click it, and I'm sad.
No,
Every
I do
time
that.
I click it.
Gotta be ethical.
Yep.
Hey everybody, just pausing our live episode to give you the first of our secret code words. It is magnitude. 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 Sort of the intensity of it's a measurement form. We're looking at the intensity, right? Or that character from Community, as featured in one of our recent podcast arts. Magnitude. Okay, back to the episode. Another problem you're going to run into, okay, I can find these articles. They're not as expensive as they used to be, but how am I supposed to keep up with these? And that's where kind of the rest of discussing communities of practice will go.
That's where you come
That's
in.
where I come in. So number one, kind of like Diana was talking about, make sure you are at a job that actually values the fact that you want to continue reading research. You want to continue improving your practice. If you're fortunate, you might find a job that treats you like you're still in grad school. Not in the sense of you're like still a student, but in the sense of you're still learning, you're never gonna stop learning, and tell you what, I'm gonna make it as easy as possible. At our staff meetings, we have articles to read. We want people to present on the articles they're reading and share their practice. I know there are some companies that do that. I know that there's not necessarily all of them to do that. But again, if you can find a place that values your learning and your increased competence, then some of this work just gets done for you. I mean, what better way to continue pushing yourself to learn than the fact that you know it is something that your job cares about you're doing every day. And not in this sort of indirect way of like, well, I want you to be good at your job because then I can give you more clients and give you more to do or give you harder clients and make more money, right? In the way that they care about the growth of the field. But, you know, again, you might have a job that does not care about that as much, so you may need to do some of that work yourself. If so, there are a couple antecedent consequence strategies that Briggs & Mateer suggests you do. One is, could you do like a Google alert for articles and research topics that you like so that it comes right to your mailbox? Again, one less button to have to click is always good. You can look at, you know, bookmarks on like Java Early View or ResearchGate homepage. Again, do the same thing as kind of a Google alert. There's a website that they mentioned called Current Contents in ABA, which I had not heard of, but I looked into it a little bit. It's at baresearchcitations.com, and you could pay them $72 a year or $6 per month, and they'll just send you like a list of like, here's some really useful research that we think you will like, and then you can go find it, I suppose. I did not sign up for that, but just thought you'd want to know, and everyone wants to know the price of things.
I wonder who runs that.
I had no clue.
I wanna do that.
It seemed
Seems like a
really
great job.
like a neat idea, but I have
Right?
no idea whose website it was.
You're like, ooh, what do you like? Curate. It's like a curated like bookstore list.
Yeah, it's like a newsletter kind of thing. I
So
don't
it's
know.
for like the behavior analyst that wants to run a bookshop but doesn't want to quit their job yet.
Some of the things you're going to need to set up, though, and it's hard to say, you're going to have to start thinking about your own self-management. Where do you put in cues? Where do you help kind of reinforce your behavior through like a self-management system for continuing to contact this literature? Some good things to do are, well, what are your study habits you have now? Don't forget them. I know I took a year off from when I was in high school till I went to college. In some ways it was fun. In some ways, terrible mistake, because I did not remember how hard I worked in high school, and then I forgot. And then you get to college and you don't have to do quite as much work necessarily the first year, and man, did I forget all my study habits. And it's taken me years to remember some of them. But you know, do you want to read on your lunch break? Do you want to read right at the last 30 minutes of the day when you know you're not going to get that much productive work done anyway, so read an article or two? Or are you engaging in other services like Wink, Wink, Nudge, Nudge, AB Inside Track, which we take a bunch of articles and you can listen to them as you're walking or running or exercising
Great
or
idea.
folding laundry.
Someone should like do a show like that.
I am going to say I was a little sad because they do mention you could listen to blogs and podcasts, and then they mention Matt Shikora's Behavior Observation. Great podcast. We love Matt. Did not mention us, whose whole remit is we read articles and then talk about them so you can listen to us tell you what you could have been reading, and then you don't have to read it if you don't want to.
It's in the notes, by the way. It was very perturbed.
I was a little peeved about that. Like, come on, like that's like the thing we do. You couldn't just have two EGs, put two podcasts. Whatever brings me to.
Next time.
Next time. Yeah, for the more, even more, Grace.
Yes, on the third go around of this article.
And then the final way that you can put some of this together is in your professional development is working to create a community of practice. So there is the cast of community. Hopefully they will be as much fun as that group was. These ideas kind of come from a number of articles, but specifically Bush et al. 2020, the behavioral article from Canada.
Yeah, the
But-
one that's not like the other.
It's not like the other, that's right. So what exactly is a community of practice? It really comes down to these concepts of finding a group of other individuals who have a domain of shared interest, and they engage in joint or similar activities to what you do, and you all have a shared area of practice. So finding other behavior analysts, or if you work in a multidisciplinary team, finding other individuals who are supporting students who maybe are trying to acquire new behaviors or engage in severe problem behavior that needs treatment. Really comes from a lot of ideas from like the early 90s, sort of in the business field, but it's moved into other fields like social work in the 2000s. So this is not something that's brand new, but it is a little bit newer in terms of how it relates to behavior analysis. But it really looks at, hey, we all have some mutual interactions that we're going to engage in. It's meant to be social too, so it should be kind of fun. It's not just like I go to a lot of talks or workshops. It's really meant to be directed by the people in the group themselves. There's a common goal you're always working towards, and you have to have a shared repertoire. So again, you have to know some of the same phrases, have similar backgrounds in terms of education, and then kind of a minimal level of expertise. So you have to be able to sort of do some of the same jobs, not exactly the same jobs. But it's really exciting to think about maybe putting something like this together because it was a way to continue sort of pushing yourself to learn, but it's more about learning and then doing something with that learning. Because it's fun to learn, but if you never do anything with it, you forget. But if you're using this information to improve your practice, there's like no telling how much you'll be able to cite that literature in the future, because all of a sudden when you're reading research and thinking about how does it relate to my job, you're always thinking about all of these things. You're putting them all together. Talk about like chains of behavior. Usually these groups are going to take the form of like getting together, maybe doing something social first, discussing some common problem. There might be some practice-based activities. So again, they could have some, behavior skills training. You might have like a speaker that sort of comes and gets the ball rolling for your meeting. Then just some general social interactions. Hey, how did that go? Or did you use that? Or questions you have about the topic. Typically there's like a small group of people that are going to sort of be in charge of the whole thing, and then varieties of people who sort of join. So again, as newer practitioners, or non-student practitioners, you probably will find this group yourself and be more on the outskirts. But again, it's a great way to get to know other people in your field, to sort of learn what challenges they've faced and sort of take that into your own practice. But you may also find that even though it's your first year sort of outside of grad school doing this, that you want to create your own community of practice. Typically, you sort of just meet other people who have the same problems, talk about possible solutions, engage in some activities, give each other feedback, and there you go. And eventually these kind of all break apart. Nothing lasts forever. But it's a great way to put what you're learning into practice in kind of a safer environment than just doing it on your own and then having no one to tell you yes or no, you did or did not do a good job, other than your stakeholders and your clients. Who, again, you don't want them to be the ones telling you, you didn't know how to do this very well, did you? That's not ideal. So you really want to have a different group who can share that information with you. Does it work? Well, there's been some research to point to it does improve people's attitudes about what they've been learning. Even in the Bush et al. Article, they sort of looked at a couple different meetings. It's a really nice article too for sort of what could it look like. These were a little bit more formal because they had them publish, and I don't think they could publish like people sitting around drinking and talking about articles as easily. So it was a little bit more. They'd have talks, they'd have a given topic, but like here's a graph of, hey, let's talk about reversals. Let's talk about writing a changing criterion design. And they sort of talked about how that could look, what that looked like for their organization. They read an article, they shared some ideas, they did some tutorials, a little BST, some feedback, and look, pre to post test, better results. Does this mean that communities of practice are like the be all end all? Well, no, there's still a lot of things we don't know about it. So for instance, could you be in a community of practice which isn't made up of behavior analysts and still get something out of it? I'd like to think yes, but we don't really know how specific those activities have to be, how closely aligned your goals and your professional development previously needs to be. But I don't think it would be a bad thing to look at, especially if you're working in a multidisciplinary team and you're not just working with other BCBAs. So again, whether you want to create a community of practice to help you with all these jobs, or whether it's something you just want to be a part of, it's something you always want to be looking out for in your fields. Ideally, they're not ones that your company runs, though that would be okay. It's usually better, it seems, in the research to be a little bit more of a social environment because, again, what you want to learn about and what your boss wants you to learn about may not be the same thing. But again, nice way to sort of keep up with what's important for your day-to-day.
And these could take place in fun environments.
Yes.
We tried to do one in a Panera, but nobody showed up. So don't do Panera.
No. Now we
That's
do
why
them in our basement.
That's why the podcast is a podcast now, because no one showed up to our journal club.
Sometimes
community
people
of
do.
practice.
Sometimes people do.
Our communities of practice, it was just us at Panera.
But you could do it bowling, mini golfing.
They have, so I don't know how much research there is in the
Drinking?
mini golf course. So again, how does this generalize to mini golf
You're
or
right,
to
we
bars?
don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. You're right.
But hey, there you want to
Thesis
publish something, and there
research.
you go. And again, at the end of the day, you need to come back to our third area, which is going to be, now you're also going to be a boss.
That's the scariest one. I'm going to bring it up because it's the scariest one. When they were like, which one do you think is the scariest? This one. When you are now thinking that you knew everything because you passed the BACB exam, and if you've done it, who thought this? I did. I'm going to own it. I was like, I'm the best. I'm too good for everyone. I'm like so good. I'm going to be the best. And turns out, guess what? I was not. I was the worst. I was the worst supervisor for the first 2 years. And I have now since apologized to all of the people that I supervised for those first 2 years. Because I was like, why don't, because I knew my behavior analysis, right? I knew what I was doing, were my clients, but man, was I not great with interactions with my supervisees. And that's hard because you're like their peers, they're your friends, right? From besties to bossies, and then you're now their boss. And who once was now your acquaintance is now you can't be their acquaintance, right? You can't like be texting them on Saturday and be like, what up, homie? Because I know that's what people still say, homie, right? You can't do that anymore. And then, on the whole nother level, providing feedback to that person, right, is a very tricky subject, right? You're like, we got drunk together just 1 month ago, and now you're telling me I'm not good at my job, right? That is
Now you're telling
very,
me I can't be drunk?
yeah, that's actually very difficult. I never had to do that.
No one
That would be
wants that
weird.
feedback.
No.
But right, so the first thing you need to do is recognize that your roles are going to be different, so your relationship is going to have to be different, right? And so I think that is the hardest move when you are supervising someone, is if you were friends with them before and now you can't be friends with them, right? And then how do you both move forward in your new relationship as supervisor-supervisee relationship, right? Because it may also be the case that you are both vying for the same job, and now you got that job. So not only is there that we used to be friends, we used to get drunk together, we used to study together, but now you have the job that I wanted, and how do you move forward to have a healthy and productive supervisor relationship? So that's one thing I want to bring up first, right? And recognize that what you want as a supervisor may not be what everyone wants as a supervisor. So I think that's also hard, because I have a new supervisor now who's in her first year, and she's like, I always wanted to have more control, and I wanted to do everything for myself, so that's what I'm going to do for all of my supervisees. And some of the supervisees love that, right? They're like, wow, I've been waiting for this my whole life. Some are like, what the F? I don't know what to do. Why aren't you telling me what to do? I want more structure. I don't like working with you. Why are you putting this on me? Isn't this your job? Right? So recognizing as a supervisor that each relationship is going to be different, and to set those boundaries early. And so that is going to be like your first day, right? Your first day, you're going to have to meet with people and be like, hey, I'm now your boss. That's going to change our relationship, and here's how, right? And it's going to be up to you to be like, I'm still going to be empathetic. I'm still going to be a good listener, but you can't call me on Saturday night when you're drunk and your boyfriend broke up with you, right? Unless something else is happening, right? You got to find other friends to do that. You're right. If you're late, I'm going to have to provide some feedback for you, right? I'm not going to be like, you're fine. It's cool to be late, because it's not cool to be late.
Yeah, and you can't play favorites.
And you can't play favorites, right? Because then people also know when you play favorites, right? Yeah, so I think setting those boundaries first is going to be really important. And I, as a new supervisor and now as an old supervisor, always make a contract with every single one of my supervisees. Even if it's not the BACB contract, I will say, here is what I'm going to do for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to meet weekly. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to give you all my attention. I'm going to provide you with articles. I'm going to provide you with opportunities. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to show up on time. You're going to come to our supervision meetings. You're going to be excited about coming to our supervision meetings. And if you're not, then we need to figure out why and what we can do differently. You're going to do the work that I've asked you to do. And if not, let's talk about why that's going to happen. So I set that right up in the beginning. Is it awkward? Oh, yeah. It's real awkward, right? Especially if it's your bestie. But then later on down the line, if you do have problems, you have something to come back to. So it seems more objective than, oh, I think she's targeting me because we used to be friends and now we're not friends. And so I think she's targeting me because I didn't do my homework for supervision, right? So I think that's one of the things that you'll want to do. Fradlin in 2022, which is the main article that I'll reference, which makes you so mad when you make an outline and then you find an article that basically follows your outline. I'm like,
You guys
man, I
scooped
should have
on this one.
This is where you got to email your notes to yourself so it's copyright you, and then they
And I was like, oh, they beat me to it. But
It's a really good article.
it is a really good article. But you want to make sure that you're establishing that relationship early and often, right? And every time that you're meeting, you're bringing something to the table. You're excited to see them. You're safe listening, right? Everything that you said as a mentor now has to come on back to you as a supervisor. Mm-hmm. Are you going to feel stressed? F yeah, right? You're definitely going to be stressed. Is there going to be things that are happening outside of your supervision relationship that you, or actual supervision session that you should be dealing with? Probably, right? Have you ever had a child in crisis when you're trying to have a supervision meeting, and then that supervision meeting keeps getting canceled and rescheduled? How does that make you as a supervisee feel? Kind of shitty, right? I shouldn't swear.
No, you're really on a roll.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's this room.
you swear a lot.
I swear a lot in this room during class. I think it's
Like
the room.
state-controlled swearing?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think it is. But right, so I think setting times where it's less likely to have interruptions is going to be helpful, right? And remember what it was like for you, because you will be that first supervisor, right? And supervisee. I made a list in 2006 of things that I liked about my current supervisor and things I didn't like about my current supervisor in 2006. And I still have that list in my desk. And I look at it every new school year, and I'm like, am I that person? Have I morphed in to the supervisor I don't like? And sometimes the answer is yes, right? And you don't mean that to happen, right? But time, resources, things happen. And then looking at that list helps me move back to the supervisor that I want to be. So I would encourage you to make that list. Like, who do you want to be as a supervisor? Who do you not? And then reference it. Maybe add things, cross things out as you get more savvy with your life. I haven't changed mine. It's like so faded. It's hilarious. You want to make sure that you've set up your supervision contracts, even for people that are not being supervised by the BACB. You create that for you so that everyone knows what's expected for your supervision meetings, where you're going to move forward. And as a new supervisor, you don't have to fly by the seat of your pants, right? It shouldn't be like sitting down and be like, what are we going to talk about today? Right? That can be a little bit, but it also should be directed. So you need to identify goals on which your supervisees are going to be working on, and they need to identify goals that they need to be working on, right? So make it, I'm going to identify 2 goals that I think you should work on. What do you think you need to work on? And why don't you put those in our goals too? So maybe have 3 or 4 goals, some of which are led by you, right? Because you need them to be doing the job that you need them to be doing. And some that are led by them so they feel like they're part of the process. And it's not just you coming into a meeting and telling them all the things that they're not doing that you want them to be doing. And so during that meeting, right, when you've identified your structure, you've identified your goals, you've signed your contract, now it's time for you as the supervisor with your supervisee in conjunction, because to be honest, you're not going to have time another time in your life. It's not like you're going to have like sit down, think about your supervisee time. It's just not possible usually in our jobs, is think about times where when they need to be engaging in activities and contrive those opportunities for them, right? For instance, my supervisor, my recent supervisee, she was really scared at giving critical feedback to someone, because isn't that scary, right? The first time you do it, it's terrifying and it's awkward and you want to be like, but it's fine. But sometimes it's not fine, right? So we identified a problem with a supervisee. She said, I have to give this feedback. I said, okay, let's pretend I'm the supervisee and you give the feedback to me first during this meeting time. We can practice it. I can tell you what I liked, what felt good to you, what felt horrible to you. You know, she ended up crying because she was so stressed out. I'm like, great, I'm glad we practiced this, because if you were crying in a supervisor meeting while you're giving supervision to someone else, the supervisee is going to be like, what's happening, right? So it's good to practice those things during those meetings, to have that time to outline what you're going to do about these things, and using behavioral skills training, it's going to be your best friend, right? We talk about it.
It's called BEST.
BST is the best, right? We talk about it in grad school, like it's in every single class. We know that it works. It's in all the articles, right? But then somehow, when we move from grad school to practice, we lose it. We lose the fact, we're like, I'm just going to tell you what to do. I'm going to give you this protocol. Bye, good luck, right? We know that doesn't work, so it's important to bring it into each of your sessions, a small little BST. This will also help you as a supervisor hone your skills, right? You can develop a checklist. You can use one that's already pre-made. I'm going to show you one in a little minute that's pre-made. But if you are making your own, you can find out where your skills may be lacking, right? And you can bring that to your supervisor. All right. This one I think is important. I don't think there's been a ton of research on it in behavior analytic literature, but allowing time for you each day to self-reflect. I know that sounds weird, right? But asking the questions, how do I think I'm doing? Where in the day do I feel happy? Where in the day am I feeling stressed and maybe yelling at someone when I shouldn't? How do I think my supervision meetings went, right? Programming on your schedule, 15 minutes to 20 minutes, I'd say every day in the beginning, right? Because every day is going to be different, and one day is going to be amazing, and one day is going to be really horrible, right? But then having that, like actually writing it down, I would recommend, and then reflecting on yourself and you as a supervisor every day, right? And then based on that, you can set your own goals. Forbes in 2018 suggests that if we do some self-reflection, this is outside of behavior analysis, it's like the management field, then you'll have a better idea of how you're doing at your job, and you'll make better decisions because you'll be aware of where you are doing a great job and where you might be falling short. So I think that it's awesome if we can strengthen our self-awareness, strengthen the specific behaviors that we may be lacking in, and that's okay, right? We're not all the best right in the beginning or at the end or in the middle, right? And recognizing that it's okay if you're not perfect all the time, and that you know you have things to work on. And as a new BCBA, if you've done something wrong, if you haven't shown up in the way that you wanted to show up, it's okay to apologize and own that. Like, what a great model for your supervisees to say, hey, I screwed up. I probably shouldn't yelled at you. I probably shouldn't have been like, that's a dumb question, even if it was, right? Because that doesn't show them how to be good supervisors in the future. So owning your mistakes, I think, is good. The last few seconds, because I only have 3 minutes left, is working with purpose. So you as a BCBA will get burnt out if you do work at home, do work on the weekends, try to be the best at all things at all times. You will cry, you will have no friends and no hobbies, right? That's not okay. But I think we've all been there at one point. I remember crying one time in 2018.
Just one time?
One time.
One time?
I'm not really a crier. I actually am. I'm a super crier. Being like, I was crying so hard, I was like, I have no hobbies. None. Like, my hobbies are my job. And my husband's like, well, get a hobby. And I was like, it's not that easy. I don't even know what I like. And he's like, well, figure it out, right? But I wouldn't have gotten there if I would have set boundaries, right? Not everything needs to be done right when it needs to be done, right? So setting your time wisely and delegating what are the 3 most important things I need to do today, and doing those things, and each day prioritizing something different, right? You shouldn't be doing work at home all the time. Sometimes you might need to. I'm not gonna say that's like a always, but you shouldn't be doing it consistently every single night on the weekends, right? If that's happening, you either need to look at your schedule, maybe you're doing too many TikToks during the morning, right? Or maybe you are, when you're writing an IEP, you're like, right? That's happened sometimes too, right? If that's happening, change that. But if you seriously are blocking your schedule off and looking at your life and you just can't fit your job in, that's when you need to talk to your mentor. And I know that a lot of my new BCBAs, that's where they find the hardest thing, is that they're trying to be perfect at everything. They're trying to be perfect at their clinical management skills. They're trying to be perfect at their supervision. They're bringing work home. They're going to work early. One of my new BCBAs texted me at 5:15 in the morning. And I was like, what the F? I'm awake, but you shouldn't be texting me a job-related question right now. You should be in bed or taking a sunrise walk or eating a bagel, but not texting work, right? You should leave that for work time. And she's like, I know, but. I was like, no buts. Nobody's in the hospital. Nobody's dying. This IEP will get written. It's not due for 3 weeks. Calm down, right? And then I think finally just remembering to keep your learning going, right? Always looking to find different ways that you can grow both in your cultural knowledge and your diversity knowledge, making sure that you are growing in your supervision knowledge and not just being like, this is the way I've always done it, or this is the way my supervisor did it, right? Because it's not helpful for us as a field, and it's not helpful for you if you're not seeking out opportunities. Or hopefully having your job pay for you to go to the BABAT conference every single year.
All right.
Done.
So, just kind of quickly wrapping up, we'll just do dissemination station sound effects. It's fun. There we go. So you got to see it live. But we really
Yeah,
don't
guys,
have,
it's me.
No, it's not
It's
a
me
fancy
every
piece
week.
of equipment. We didn't bring it. It's over here.
I perfected it after that one commercial from the 90s where the girl is standing on the train station, the train goes away, and she's crying. Do you remember this? It was like a coffee commercial. I think it was Maxwell House.
I absolutely love, Jackie, that you're always like, no, I don't have that cultural reference, another cultural reference. You're like, here's a cultural reference from like the most minute.
I think it was a Canadian
It's
commercial.
usually either Canadian
I thought you were gonna say Twix.
or...
No.
Oh, yeah. No. But we don't really have
Specific.
much for Dissemination Station in the sense that really
We have
we
done it.
did this talk specifically in as dissemination.
Yeah, the whole thing, really.
But we do have a new segment, which I was going to forget about, but Diana was typing some extra notes in it, so I
Hold
feel
on,
bad.
I forgot this. This is a really nice
yeah.
self-monitoring checklist about supervision in the Friedland et al. 2022. So they have a ton of awesome stuff in the appendix. So look at that one if you want to steal it, because they put it in there for you to steal.
There you go.
Okay.
But we have a new section on our show called Pairing.
Last segment.
She loves doing it, so here it is.
I do.
We
so
love hearing it too. Sorry, that sounded really condescending, didn't it? It
did.
Sorry about that.
It went right over my head because
Okay.
I'm so into pairings. So pairings, because now this is, I don't know what episode this is. It's like almost 250. So we've had like a lot of episodes. So I like to relate the topic here back to previous episodes because who else is really going to do that? And that way, if you liked this, you can like go back and find some related things. So for this one, because we covered a lot of ground here, I have a few recommendations. All the way back in episode 38 and 39, we reviewed the Supervisor's Guidebook by Green, Parsons, and Reed. So if you need Supervision 101, that is a good place to start. I also would recommend episode 100, where we discuss the history of ABA with Dr. Gina Green. That might be the closest we get to having like a mentorship kind of episode, and it's always lovely to hear her speak. Episodes 172 and 173, we talk about research to practice and practice to research. That reminded me of what you were saying, Rob. And then we have a bunch related to supervision stuff. Episode 179, which is the ethics of supervision. Episode 184, where doctors Seth Walker and Tyra Sellers talk about receiving feedback. And finally, episode 199, where we talk about preventing burnout with Dr. Julie Sloviak. So any of those you might go back and check out. Pairings also includes not just something to listen to, but something to snack on. So, of course, for this episode, it would have to be all the delicious things that we have here at this BABAT student live event. What I really have my eye on are those grape leaves with the hummus and the feta right next to them. And then we can't forget the killer chocolate chip cookies. So that was Pairings.
We hope you enjoyed this live episode in which we actually got to go somewhere. It was very exciting. Nice return to normalcy, I suppose. A couple other people we want to thank. We certainly want to thank you for listening. And if you're interested in seeing what we did before the talk even started, including maybe playing a little game and hearing from the student group, you might want to join us on Patreon, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can see the video of our talk, see a little bit of extra bonus footage, and get a free CE. That's for only $5 a month. You can get that, plus access to any other live show that we have done or will done in the future. And if you want even more ABA Inside Track content, why not subscribe at the $10 level to get all of that, plus access to our quarterly book clubs and 2 CEs for no additional charge. Again, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the show and keep subscribing on your favorite podcast player. Find our website, abainsidetrack.com, to purchase CEs and to find links to all of the research articles that we discuss in our episodes. You can check us out on socials and get in touch there, or you can email us, abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Finally, big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro and outro music, Kyle Sturry for our interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. Oh, yes, and your last secret code word is LOST, L-O-S-T. It's a TV show. Remember Lost? It could also just describe a state of being, not where you want to be or not knowing where you're going. But I'm mostly thinking of the TV show. Remember that? What a great ending, right? I agree. I thought it was good. Anyway, I'll cut back to our live recording to wrap up our episode. Oh, thank you, Diana. Well, that is all of our recording. We want to thank you all for coming out on such a night. The first was the second
So
nice day in
beautiful.
about a month, but you came and sat in a room to listen to us talk. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to all of the folks from BABAT for having us. We love BABAT as an organization. We love the conference. We love any chance we can to mingle and see everybody. So thank you so much for having us. And I guess that's it. So for folks who weren't here to have grape leaves with us and all of us, we'll see you next week for another episode, which all of you won't. Sorry, you can't come to our basement, but, feel free to listen to it online. But until then, keep responding. Goodbye.
Bye.